Hi, welcome to Raise Sensation. I'm your host, Dan, and today we're going to be looking at a couple of books on the subject of the men's adventure magazines. Join me, won't you? Okay, so the men's adventure magazines kind of grew out of the same area that those grittier comics, the horror and the true crime comics, had grown out of. And that is, after World War II, returning veterans wanted something a little grittier for their entertainment. And actually, I believe a lot of the people who had stayed home felt that way too. It just called for something a little more adult. And now the crime comics and the horror comics, the problem with those was they were on the racks next to kids' comics. And so kids were looking at all the horror and crime comics. And we know that for sure because so many people who would grow up to make horror comics or other types of comics would all talk about what an influence those comics were on them. So the comics got stomped down, and they ended up creating the Comics Code Authority, and that was the end of those. But the men's adventure magazines, as time went on, just kept pushing the boundaries and pushing the boundaries, with, some of the publishers getting charged with obscenity and things like that. And so these books kind of deal with that. This is actually the same book. This is two versions of the same book, but I'll talk about some of the other ones too. And the men's adventure magazines, there were a lot of stories of GIs fighting Nazis in those first ones. And there was a lot of Nazi exploitation covers, which we'll take a look at. Now, I didn't get into these. I would see these on the stands as a kid, and I would marvel at those covers. I'd be like, whoa, I'd like to see what's inside that. But I didn't really see them until I was a teen in the early 70s. And then I was seeing them. Now, I would see them sometimes at other people's homes, and I would always try and sneak a look, try not to get yelled at for looking at something like that. The stories I was most interested in, now I do like adventure stories. I like things like that. But what I really wanted was the animal attack stories. And they have this in spades. As a matter of fact, I would sometimes read Field and Stream. I knew, a lot of people in my family hunt and fish. We different people I knew would have Field and Stream magazine, things like that. And I was always looking for animal stories in those animal attack things. The idea of the animal turning the tide against the hunter kind of thing, turning the tables. So that was my main interest in them. And I also liked, occasionally, they would have stories about cryptoids, like Bigfoot, things like that. And so those were what I was mostly interested in. Now, like I said, this is a book from Taschen. This was the first version. Actually, there might have been an edition before this, slightly different format. But this was the last version, the last version of it that was done in print. They're all out of print, but this was printed in pretty big quantities, I think, because you can find used copies of it pretty easy. I'm going to take a look, of course, at the version with the bigger pictures. And like I said, I'm just going to go through this really kind of quickly. It starts off with a history, the pulp, and then the slicks, and all the things leading up to the men's adventure magazines proper. And now I've heard several people complaining online about the fact that there's some of this is not written in English. Well, the fact is, Taschen is a German publisher, and they often print up to 4 different languages in a book. The thing is, you're not missing anything by not being able to read those other languages, even though the non-translated parts are with different pictures. They're really just repeating rather, the same thing that they did say in English. So don't be upset about it. It's just a way that they could make one version, print up a lot of copies, and sell them in a bunch of different countries. That's really all it is. It's a great model for them. It leads them to be able to do a lot of really great looking, big, expensive art books. And yeah, nowadays they're pretty expensive, but it really helps them make them cheaper than they would be if they didn't do that. And like I said, there's a history in here. Not a big, not a long one, but it's pretty well written. And then there's smaller essays throughout the books. They've divided up the book into different larger stories sections. So like the very first chapter is the one I'm most interested in, When Animals Attack. And they've called it Weasels Ripped My Flesh, because famously Frank Zappa ripped off that title for one of his album covers. And, there's all kinds of, like, now I should be upset because look at this. They're going to try and make you think that iguanas are dangerous. Yeah, that's a little sad, but it's a cool image. I love it. There's one of the Tarzan movies ends with people in a cave trying to escape, and iguanas are swimming through the water after them, and they're acting like they're piranhas or alligators or something, and pulling people under. Giant ants attacking, spiders. I like this one. There's several different monkeys attacking boats. And the idea that spider monkeys are going to swarm over you and attack you is a pretty good one. And here's, big cats attacking. Here's some type of snakes are swarming this guy who's fallen in the water. Snakes everywhere. I think that's a pretty potent image. Here's a guy stuck in quicksand, and there's what looks like a cobra about to get him. All these snakes attacking. And again, I love snakes. There's so few of them that would actually do you any harm. I don't really like that people a lot of times will kill a snake right off the bat, no matter what. Well, it's unnecessary, but does make for great images. And here's snapping turtles, and there's a couple of these the stories are really great. They're really, really gruesome. They might not be believable if you really know the animals, but a lot of fun. Starving rats attacking. So I won't go through too much more of this, but suffice to say that's a great chapter in the book. There's baboon. I think baboons are pretty scary looking. So that's a good one. And so the whole book is mostly made up of the covers, and they have some original artwork, so it doesn't have the titles over top of it. But like I just happened to turn to this one, story about pirates, and this is one of the interior pages. That's why it's in black and white. There's another interior illustration. Sometimes the interior illustrations were gorier or sexier than they could be on the cover. Here's one that's on American history type titles, and this is, of course, Westerns and stuff. And then a lot of things about women being molested by non-whites. Put it that way. Again, I don't want to go through too much of this. Primitive cultures, there's titles on that. Here's some of the World War II stuff. And here's more expert. This is in German. Like I said, everything's in several languages. throughout. There's a bunch of the Nazi stuff. Apparently the Nazi covers there's some of those are the most collectible, at least at this point. Oh, this is a wild image. And this chapter is about GIs returning home and finding society is all messed up. And there's some bikers attacking some poor woman. So, there you go. That's that book. Men's Adventure Magazines by Taschen, the German publisher. And like I said, of course, bigger might be better. This version's a lot easier to find. It's a hardcover. There's also this book, which is called It's a Man's World. This is an updated edition, which threw in a little bit of editorializing about tying some of the themes in the men's adventure magazines to current day affairs. So some of you might not like that, but I thought it was interesting. Many of these men's adventure magazines play into a lot of prejudices that the white male that they were being sold to held already. So just saying they're not politically correct would be would be understating it, because there's such a thing as real propaganda. You don't need to call that un-PC to point out the propaganda part of it. And in this book, like I say, in the beginning, they're talking about some of the roots of the way the men's magazines treated, the enemy in World War II. See, and these aren't not. This is from Collier's, which was a Slick. That was that's not a men's magazine. That was considered a high-class publication back in the day. And so this is how the regular magazine world was treating the enemy, the way they depicted them. And there's a lot of good material in here about that. And I think it's really interesting and really good, and it leads up to the sweats. Now here's some of the other things that we're sharing the stage with the sweat mags. Women in crime, Dare magazine, Sex Under Hypnosis, Homosexuals Answer Back, Is Jane Mansfield Bust Legal? The Truth About Fluorides. All really good stuff. Oh, here's an early one talking about Liberace. Why Liberace's theme song should be Mad About the Boy. And this is a great, this one actually has a lot more writing in it. It's all in English, but it has a lot more writing about the history of the pulps and also about the history of the people who edited, wrote, and illustrated the pulps. And not pulps, men's adventure magazine. These are a form of pulps too, so that's not a bad thing to call it. But the men's adventure magazines, the sweats, and this is really great. It was a great, it's a great one-stop shopping for finding out about a lot of this stuff. And here there's a Mario Puzo, who went on to write The Godfather, of course. Famously wrote for the men's sweats, and he talks a little bit about his experience there. So that's a really great little bit. So you see all this history there. More wartime propaganda. That's from World War I. And then it also has, this is one of the artists, Norman Saunders, and it talks about his, it has talks about his career overall. Like, he started out in the pulps. He also did trading cards, these Topps ones. And this is written by his son, David. And David wrote an entire book, a fantastic book I can't recommend highly enough. Um, and, you know, this is, you know, this is a good short look at that. And if you find this interesting, you should definitely check out that entire book about Norman. Then it does the same thing with the other book did, where it kind of groups the covers together. This one's on American history, how it was covered. And again, it shows some of the stuff before these magazines and how things were depicted. Frontier Times. I guess he looks more like a pirate than a prospector, but True Tales of the Old West. These prospectors are always finding treasures. Man, of course, there's one of those gory ones. It's a great cover. That definitely looks like it's done by the same people who did the Erie Press comics. Taking a little too long on this. And of course, there's a chapter on the animal attacks things. Great picture of that polar bear. This guy being run to earth. A couple of good pictures of polar bears attacking. More on other cultures kind of things. World War II stuff. Some of the Nazi stuff. I won't go through too much of this. There's a lot of torture involved in this. And here's some more of the vets return home and find things gone to hell. What you need is a good... Okay, so that's... I recommend this one. I recommend this for the articles. Doesn't have as many covers as the other magazine. You probably need them both, but really great book. And now the final thing I'm going to talk about, and I unfortunately don't have a lot of copies of their work here, but when it comes to the stories, I don't want to collect a lot of these magazines. I don't want to search around. A lot of the stories aren't that good. I'd be buying them for the artwork, and obviously there's all these books now that have the artwork printed up real nice, not on terribly printed newsprint that it's rotting away as you read it. So there's all those nice books, but what about reading the stories? There's a lot of mediocre stories, but there's a lot of really good stuff in there too. And the Men's Adventure magazine, this press here, and you can find these at menspulpmags.com, and they have been publishing collections. Like, this is a collection of Men's Adventure magazine stories about killer sharks. And they've reprinted a bunch of the stories from the pulps. And there's some of the interior artwork that was done for some of them. There's reprints of some of the covers. They also had a shark specialist talk about the reality of these stories. And of course, we now know that sharks. There are years that go by with no serious shark attacks, let alone people getting killed by them. So it's really incredibly rare, but it does happen. So they're scary, but the shark biologist, marine biologist, puts it in perspective. These are some great. So this is a great way. They've picked some of the better stories. They've got some of the great art. And look at that. And like I said, this is a series of books. Here's some more of them. Now, my favorites on this are Weasels Ripped My Flesh, which is the animal attack ones. And there's also Cryptozoology, which is a great one about like Bigfoot and sea monsters and stuff like that. And I watched Them Eat Me Alive. It's another good collection. And now they also have done some really great looking books on the artists behind these great covers and this interior work. And they've even done a book on one of the models who posed for a lot of these covers. So I can't recommend enough. Please go to the website. All these things are available on Amazon too, but it might be easier to see them all in one place at the website. They also sell the books through the website, so you can order them that way too. And the newest edition, beyond publishing these great books, is they're putting out a magazine now too. And each of these magazines is covering a genre. And this first one was on Westerns. Now, I mean, I like Westerns okay, and I read the magazine. It's not my absolute favorite genre, but and there's other things covered in the magazine. But it's a great magazine, really well done, easy to read. Like I said, unlike rooting through stacks of the rotting magazines themselves, because that darn newsprint doesn't stay very well, and you don't know if you're going to be getting the mediocre stuff. They've picked out good stuff for you, nicely printed. So there you go. So check out these books if this sounds interesting to you at all. And until next time.